You're listening to the Motley Biz. If it happens in the world, it gets discussed here. And now your host, Adrian Matthews.
Welcome back to the Motley Biz, and thank you so very much for tuning in. Now, if you've got a house, if you rent a flat, if you own a space, if you live somewhere, then this episode is for you, because we are talking to an interior designer, and not just any kind of interior designer, but Kelly Gale Amen, who has been an interior designer for over 50 years, during which, of course, he modeled and remodeled interiors of all kinds and sorts. And today, he's actually sharing bits and pieces of both his journey, which is an extensive one, and the tips that he gathered along his path to make your space an oasis for living, for working, and of course, for loving. Let's hear it together.
Let me just say thank you so very much for doing this interview with me, Kelly. It's such a pleasure to have you and to get to speak to you. How are you doing?
Adrian, good morning. There's nothing I like more than sharing my experiences of life and a little bit of information of what I know to help create the knowledge.
And quite the experience you have on that, and we're so very grateful for that. But before I ask you to share the experience and the intelligence that you have now gathered after over 4 decades of work as an interior designer, I'd like to take it back a little bit and ask you how it all started. How did you get into interior design?
You know, Adrian, that's a wonderful question. I was raised in the Midwest in Oklahoma, in rural Oklahoma, not knowing anything about so many levels, but being full of experimentation and questions. I knew that I was really good with cubic space, and I knew I was really good with placement and color and creative energy. So my parents helped me channel through that, and I went to the University of Oklahoma, got my Bachelor of Arts in the School of Home Economics. From there, though, then I realized that it was a much broader possibility than just a Bachelor of Arts. I graduated, then I interviewed in New York, Chicago, Dallas, LA, Houston, and realized that Houston was a boom town. In the early 70s, it was really the frontier. So I took a position here with a department store on their design staff, and that started the adventure professionally.
So was that the first place that you ever designed, or did you have any previous little project that you did either in your house with your parents or anywhere else? What was your first, or what's your first memory where you arranged a space to create a certain mood, and how did that make you feel?
Well, that's a great question. When I was much younger, my mother always said that I would move everything just a few inches or just diametrically opposed, and it was always better. I could always play and support the space with something imaginative and juxtapositioned. So as a child, I did that. When I was in college, I also did a dress shop in my hometown, Weatherford, and I did a restaurant during college in Norman. So I was working even from the beginning. But the funny part of it is that my father always said, there's 2 things that I can do for you. I can give you your education, and I can teach you how to work. Well, I didn't want to work in the country, so my uncle, who had a furniture appliance hardware store, said, great, you want to be a designer? Come and work for me. So my first true touch of objects was cleaning used appliances in my uncle's furniture store. That was the beginning.
And how far you've come since then. So you've mentioned a lot of things about, rearranging things just a couple of inches. Do you find that that's generally the most important part of interior design, or how would you define the market or the industry or the craft that you have? First of all, would you define it as a market, industry, or a craft?
Well, I think what happens is I think it's an industry. Because I think what happens is when I started, it was very different than it is now. It was such that not everybody knew what a designer was, and people didn't know on the market what was available because we didn't have the internet.
So was there a lot of competition? Was there a lot of other interior designers?
The competition was different because what happens now, anybody that Googles a bed and orders it becomes a designer. Anyone that orders a gallon of paint and paints the wall is now a designer. So the industry has changed and the terminology is very different. I prefer to take it out of all of that and its energy. I prefer to mold, transfer, infuse the whole space with energy by the objects and what the people have.
So let's break it down. So you mentioned two parts of design. So obviously there's the hard part where you paint and you order the couches and the beds and the pieces of furniture. But you mentioned energy. Which one do you think makes you a designer? Because, you know, when you paint a wall, are you a wall painter or are you a designer? Do you think that painting the wall with a purpose is what brings a design quality to it?
Well, I think, and your question is multidimensional as well. I think that space is broken, and designing, I think it's broken into three things. I think it's the shell, which is the wall, the floors, the ceiling. It's the content, second, which is the furniture, the unusual objects, and the utilitarian aspect. And the third is the decorative and the collectible. I think that if you have a blue room and it's filled with objects and you have great art, you can take it either passive or aggressive or mild or wild, whichever's comfortable for you. But I think the process is what is called the designing.
So how do you start? How do you start when there's a client that comes to you and says, okay, I want this house designed? What was the first thing that you do?
Oh, Adrian, I love that question, and people can't believe what I ask. What I do is, Adrian, I go, someone's beeping in. Can you? What happens though? Beep 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 beep. Adrian, what happens is, I never ask the client or the potential client what they love. I always start and ask them what they hate. Because if I delete the hate and the confusion and the dislike, I can pretty much take the project any direction with their infusion. But if I don't delete the negative, there's always this abyss that surrounds us and we can't get past it.
And I think that's how you get your artistic freedom as well, right? You define the blacklist, things that are not going to happen, and then you tailor around with the infinite opportunities that are outside that blacklist.
Without question, and include people, letting them know that their thought process is really important. Because people, once they know that you're listening to them, it's really amazing how much further you can take the project and how much and the participatory elements of it. That's what I love. I just love finding people find themselves.
You know, as you were mentioning it, I was thinking about art and the history of art. And I think that interior design at this point is the only art that maintains the honor of patronage just like it used to be before. You know, the great paintings of the world, the great pieces of music, the great sculptures, they were ordered by somebody. They were created with a purpose for a specific client. It wasn't just an artist's vision, but it was a duty that the artist fulfilled, which now I think became blurred in a sort of artistic hypocrisy versus vision, whereas interior design maintains that. So how important, or is it essential, or is it completely useless, is client input interaction? And when you approach a project, do you think I'm doing this project as Kelly Gale Amen with my vision, or I'm doing it as Kelly Gale Amen for the specific person?
Adrian, I think that's another great question. I think it's a combination. I think if I'm really tuned into the client, I'm going to make that project their home. Juxtaposition, though, anything I touch has my signatures on it. So you will know a KGA project, but the key is that the KGA project is for client A or client B or client C, because I'm hopefully using their pieces from their collections and from their past and from their present, and where they can take it to the future.
So how did you elaborate your KGA statement pieces? How did you come to your artistic identity? Was it from the start? Did it happen gradually?
Well, if you look at an artist or any artist, historically, they have a pulse.
Right.
They have a synergy. They have a mojo. MySpace and one of the great parts about MySpace is you can't tell which decade I put together any of them. But what I have that's a consistency in mine is I love color. I love mirror. I have a innate sensibility of juxtapositioning pieces in unorthodox position where you really see them differently than you've ever seen them anywhere else. And yes,
I was going to ask you, what about functionality? You mentioned putting pieces in unexpected positions. Your craft, your art, your industry, to some extent, I would assume, involves some sort of functionality. Do you make it your aim to incorporate that in your art, or does it just come naturally?
It's a combination, again, of both. I want every space to be functional because we sleep, we sit, we eat, we do. We have to have functional objects. And that incorporated into functional space creates a functional life. We're now doing at-home offices. Well, I've been self-employed since I began, so I've always had my at-home office, and we work 90% of the waking hour. So why wouldn't you have your environment where you can enjoy it and laugh and play and not be extricated from it?
So you love what you do. Have you ever worked a day in your life?
Oh, I don't even know what work is. I mean, Adrian, I love what I do. I love when the client calls and goes, "Oh, are you sure that's the right shade?" And I go, "Well, I don't know, but let's get together and look at it." And I enjoy the whole process of taking someone who doesn't know to a place that they do know, or expanding on it, or letting them know that it's okay to go, "I like this, I don't like this, I want this, I don't want this," but letting them know that they have to be an integral part. And if they're not, you might as well just go to a showroom or buy online a house full of furniture and you don't care what happens with it. That's not what I do.
So there's a psychology element to interior design. You need to accommodate your client. Do you think that still happens nowadays? Because from what I saw and from my little exploration of the interior design market, there is a lot of superiority, hypocrisy in it. Do you think that people have forgotten to value their clients?
I think that I don't know that it's as much the designer as it is the client. The client is always trying to cut the middlemen out, making sure that they get the cheapest deal possible. Well, you don't get the cheapest deal possible if you're really going to get something that's magical. And what happens is, that's not to sound negative, but, it takes paint so long to dry, and it costs so much for content, and it takes periods of time to get from one point to the next. So I find that in the industry right now that there's so much that people do online and they really don't have any idea. I was at a job this morning where the people bought online a piece of furniture. It came in with half of it there. They called the supplier. They sent another one, and they said, if there's not all of it here, just give it all to Goodwill. I mean, I can't even imagine the level of that extreme, because when we do it or I do it, I want everything to be valuable and important in the client's eye, and as well as not being wasteful.
So where do you get your materials? Obviously, online is not the most ideal environment to obtain them, which makes complete sense, by the way, because when you have a space, you need to see everything in action. But I know as a fact, and I'm asking you because I know everything that you have is made in a special way. So can you tell us the story of KGA products?
Well, the interesting part, Adrian, is online. You can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you can't see it. You don't know what you're really getting.
Right.
Now, my product, I started in 72. I started doing three-dimensional space, homes. I got the cover of First International magazine in 76. So publicity has never been a problem for me because it's always been beautiful and interesting and unexpected. Now, that's not to say that it's so outrageous that it's not timeless, because if you look, as I said earlier, over the years that I've been doing it, you can't tell which decade I did which project in, because it's always been a combination of various levels and all periods. Because if a piece is good, it doesn't matter which period it's from. It's just good.
Right. And you've actually been in Vogue with your pieces, right? You actually appeared in Vogue Mexico.
I've been in Vogue Mexico. I've been in residential interiors. I've been in, I've been, and I have an online presence. And what I love doing is I love using my creative energy to help organizations. I started my pillows in 1980. I started my metal furniture in 1990. I started my fabrics in 2005. So I've just been contiguously working, and my metal is cast in Alabama. My wood furniture is done here in Houston. My fabrics are done in Bangalore and Kashmir. It's navigating the world and looking how to use what you find that is quality and veneer that into your space.
So how did you navigate? What was the navigation process that you used to create the vagina pillow, also known as the Athena pillow, which is a statement of yours and incredible to look at?
I love that. I love you asking me that. I wanted a sleeping bag. So I started working with what it is the Athena or the vagina pillow is 5 pillows put together with seamstress work so that it winds up just being the shape it is. And it from there morphed and morphed and morphed. And I've loved it on every level, because you can sit on the floor and use it for yoga. You can put it on the sofa. If you break your foot, you can put the ankle in the crevice. You can wear it as a hat if you're really illustrious. It's just a wonderful, wonderful pillow.
Oh, and it definitely catches the attention and starts conversations. That's for sure. From the little talks I've had with your clients, I know that pillow makes a complete scandal in every home, and it's a conversation starter. So, with all this journey that you've had up until now and all these products, I'm sure there have been some things that surprised even you when you've learned or discovered them. So in the world, in the rule book of interior design, if there is a rule book, what is something you discovered that was unexpected or counterintuitive? And I'm talking here not necessarily about clients, but about colors that don't go well together, or items that people use a lot, or simply the fact that people are just tasteless and they don't know how to arrange their homes.
Well, I think what's interesting for me, and I'm going to approach that a little differently, when people ask me what's in fashion, my response is always, I have no idea what's in fashion. I have no idea. I just know that I love doing what I do. And a room, it has basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planes: the floor, the ceiling, and 4 walls. Most people think if you paint the ceiling white, the room gets better and bigger. That's not particularly true. I don't really just normally do an accent wall. That doesn't seem to intrigue me or entice me to anything. but I love the saturation of color. I find that if you take a small room, a hallway, a small powder room, paint it black, it feels bigger. It's doing the unexpected and taking it out of the thought process of what people are used to. That's the key.
So what do you think is something that everybody should have in their home? What's like one thing that's not a couch or a bed, but something that everybody should have that not everybody has?
I think they should have something from their life that they love. I think you have to have something that pulls the past to the present to the future. It may be a book, it may be a chair, it may be a walking cane, but you have to have something that keeps you committed to your life.
And what about something that you should never have?
It goes back to the thing. If you hate it, you should never keep it in your house. You should never, because it abscesses and it creates more negative and more grief. Do not keep the negative around.
Now, Kelly, I dare to say you are one of the fathers of interior design, especially in Houston, because you've inspired many, you've received so many awards, and I'm sure you must feel both pride and a little bitterness, not in the sense of envy, but in the sense of disappointment when you see the new generation of interior designers and the chances that they've got and the intense competition that they've got.
Adrian, I think I love that question because I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. The key that I'm interested in is learning how the newest technology generation revolution is and how they're depersonalizing everything and how to get the personality back in. Because it's all great to live a virtual world. That's wonderful. But my industry represents and produces a tangible world. And interior design isn't doing a CAD drawing and going, oh, isn't that perfect? Well, it's not perfect. And the key is to take that virtual, how we can embrace the tangible, because ultimately the client wants the sofa, the bed, the rug, the part, all of it in place. So they're really buying a tangible, but the new industry and the designers are selling virtual service, and that really isn't what it is.
So
I don't know if I explain that well enough, Adrian?
You did. But what specifically, what advice would you have for a young designer? You know, go in person, don't go digital.
I would suggest that the people need to understand that they're going to have to get into the tangible as well as the virtual. They need to know what they're selling and what they're doing. They need to know what that's about.
So what are you, if you were a new designer, actually no, scratch that, because you're not a new designer and you shouldn't be. Because
I am. Every day I'm a new designer.
So what are your plans? What are your future plans, new designer?
To keep working harder and harder and harder and seeing who I can enforce to see the way this really is, that virtual reality is a new game. But if you go to the supermarket, you're not interested in a virtual steak.
Right.
You're not interested in a virtual salad. You're interested in a tangible product that can be filled with sustenance. If you're hiring a designer and all they can do is give you a CAD drawing and tell you that it will be beautiful, that probably isn't good enough.
Yeah, at the same time, real interior design doesn't go away with a power cut. You're still in the room.
Right. If you commit to fabulous fabrics and fabulous spaces, it's a tangible. It's going to be costly and it's going to take time to get there. So you have to realize that this whole virtual thing is wonderful, but it doesn't have a longevity at this point. It may. We may be able to push a button and the room will become a reality, but I'm not seeing it.
Right. Do you think it can still make money, the industry, or do you think it's dying?
I think it will always make money. it will always make money because there's always going to be people who want that incredible chair or that incredible sofa or that incredible bronze table from KGA or the vagina pillow from KGA. There's always going to be people who are going to want it. And there's always going to be people who are going to knock it off. But that's a different thing. There will always be the talent and the ability to produce the talent and the product, and it will always be collectible.
Have your products ever been knocked off?
Oh, for sure. I know it constantly, and it's usually the people who are shopping. Shop. How can I get it cheaper? How can I get it cheaper? Can I get the workrooms to make it cheaper? That happens all the time. But it's and I don't mind on any level if people knock it off. It's just not the real thing. Do you follow?
It'll never have the value. Now, Kelly, before I thank you for your time and wrap up this interview because it's been close to half an hour already, just wanted to tell our lovely listeners where to find the vagina pillow and every piece of KGA furniture and your services. www.kga.net is where they can find you and interact with you. There's also social media where they can actually get to speak to you. And I'm sure we open this chat function to both clients and young designers because I'm sure you're an inspiration to many.
Right. I mean, I am round the clock available. I mean, I love what I do. I think it just makes me happy on every single level. I welcome anyone calling to ask me anything, whatever it is, because all we have is time. And time is filled with what we do and who we do it with.
And with that wisdom, Kelly, I will thank you very much for your time and invite everybody to check out your website again, www.kga.net. Thank you for joining me today and for having this lovely conversation. And I definitely look forward to your future project and seeing more of you. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Adrian, as well. Thank you.